Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. On this edition of Another View, Her Honor, Judge Eileen Olds. During the day, she is meting out justice at the Chesapeake Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court. Now she is also the author of Twin Expectations, Raising the Bar, Raising Expectations, Raising Children. Today, we talk with Judge Olds about the book, about family, and about how we can reclaim our most precious resource, our kids. Join the conversation at 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Another View is next, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
And happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Just want to say a very special thank you to Lisa Godley for filling in for me last week while I was out of town. Now, I know we are in the middle of Tropical Storm Andrea, and I also know when I came into the studio that the sun was shining brightly. Let's check in with meteorologist Terry Smith and find out exactly what's going on. Hi, Terry.
Hey, good afternoon.
So the sun is shining brightly. Are we just in a lull? What's happening?
Well, we're getting some breaks in the rain. We had a large area of widespread light rain, but we're starting to see some breaks in the rain. But the tropical storm is still down south of us, south of Fayetteville, North Carolina. So while we've got a break at the moment, I don't expect that we'll stay dry for the rest of the day. I still think we've got some more of the heavy rain that'll head our way this afternoon and into the evening hours as well. Okay. So, and the tornado watch, is it still? Yeah, the tornado watch is still in effect. In fact, when you see the sun come out in a situation like this, that's not helpful because that sunshine can actually increase the potential for strong to severe thunderstorms. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that potential for severe weather through at least 1 o'clock. It could be extended past that. That's one aspect of this tropical storm that we'll have to monitor very closely because that's something that can change in very short order.
Okay. And excuse me, how long do you think the rain will go on today? Into this evening?
Yes, I think it'll continue actually probably into the overnight hours, at least part of the overnight hours. But I think the heaviest of the rain will be this afternoon and early this evening. I also think that's when we're going to feel the winds more than later on tonight. We should see the rain taper off late tonight and the winds begin to ease up as well.
Okay. Meteorologist Terry Smith with the Weather Channel. Terry, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it. Take care now. So we need to keep an eye on the weather. Keep your radio dial to 89.5 WHRV-FM for latest updates, and stay safe out there, everyone. Before we get into our discussion today with Judge Eileen Olds, and I'm so excited that she's here, we're going to talk about raising kids today. I want to also encourage particularly the men and the women out there who love their husbands, spouses, daddies, brothers, the men in your life to participate on Father's Day weekend. That's next Saturday and Sunday, June 15th and 16th. Two churches in our area, Basilica of St. Mary of the Immaculate Conception in Norfolk and Carver Memorial Presbyterian Church in Newport News. They are both staging concurrent prostate health education symposiums from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. And then on Sunday, they're holding Father's Day rallies against prostate cancer on Sunday, June the 16th. You know, African-American men in Hampton Roads have among the highest prostate cancer death rates nationwide. You need to get tested. We need to find out about this disease. So I strongly encourage you to go to either the Basilica of St. Mary of Immaculate Conception in Norfolk or Carver Memorial in Newport News and participate. For further information, dial 827-0488 or 683-8836. And those numbers are on our website at anotherviewradio.org. WHRO and WHRV has embarked on a multi-year nationwide Corporation for Public Broadcasting initiative to improve on-time graduation rates and lower dropout rates. It's called American Graduate, Let's Make It Happen. And each month on Another View, we take an in-depth look at issues critical to the academic success of our children. And that is what our discussion is about today. Our guest is a twin. She's an identical twin, in fact. She is a judge, and her sister is a doctor. Judge Eileen Olds and her sister grew up in a single-parent household, and she says it's because of her mother's love that she and her sister defied lower expectations and overcame negative influences. She's the author of Twin Expectations, Raising the Bar, Raising Expectations, Raising Children. Welcome to Another View, Judge Olds. So glad to see you.
Thank you so much, and I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. So when we talk about the fact that you and your sister defied the odds and you are both very accomplished, obviously, was there ever an expectation in your household that you wouldn't be successful?
No, it was a given for as long as I can remember that we would always give our best, not only in school, but in terms of service to the community. I just wanted to go back. I was so happy to hear you mention the initiative about education and graduation success, because my mom always instilled in us that education really is, and I still believe that, it's the great equalizer. And so whether you're from a single parent home or a home with not as many financial resources or even family support, education is the one thing that can always set you above and the rest of the fray. And I think it's so important that, especially for young persons, and more today, when we look at graduation rates for African American males being right at 50%, that is,
I know, it's alarming.
It really is. So that is a great concern.
And that starts with taking the time to spend time with your children as they are infants up through their lives, in terms of raising them to respect education and to understand that that is their ticket. Well,
again, from my generation, and I stay in touch with the younger generation, seeing youth all day, every day. But in our generation, it was expected that you want to better yourself. And so parents and guardians and other concerned adults always wanted their children to do better than they did. Somewhere along the way, and there are a number of factors that I think may contribute to that, but it became okay for children to decide if they wanted to go to the next level, or if they felt like getting up and going to school. And I think that's where the increase in the dropout rate and the lack of success comes from. But again, it was expected. We use that word expectations. That's part of the title of the book. But the premise of the book is just that: expect more. Expect more.
You know, it's interesting because you're right. Even within my household growing up, there was no question of if you were going to school. It was a question of where you were going to go. That expectation was there. What do you think some of the social factors are today that allow us, this generation, maybe not to have that expectation that their kid can succeed and should succeed?
Yeah, I think it probably starts with less of an appreciation for how hard it was for African Americans to have equal access to education. And so in years past, again, with that appreciation, there was an expectation and a desire to take advantage of it. I think part is the disconnect between history and the present day enjoyments that we have, not really understanding that this is something that was fought for, something that people paid with their lives and with their time, energy, and money to make it possible for children to have an equal education. So I think part of it is we need to go back and teach more history and teach the importance of understanding what a process this was. The other part, I think, goes along with just general trends where parents have begun to let children chart the course a little too much themselves. And so it's not so much that you are going to school, and if you don't go to school, if you don't get an education, you're not going to do all these other things. But I think it's become more optional. And I see that as a major problem.
Sometimes people blame mothers in particular, especially if they happen to be a single mother, and they say, you see all these statistics of everything that's going to go wrong with the child, but your premise is you can still raise your children, whether you're a single parent, whether you're in a two-family household, whatever the situation is, you still have the responsibility to discipline, to instill confidence, to work with your kids so that they can be successful.
Right. I don't buy the single parent equaling a greater obstacle theory. I think it's true that it's more difficult when you are not only the breadwinner, but you are the only parent and the only guidance in the house. But the way I was raised, and again, I was raised by a single mother, I didn't hear a lot of discussion about her status. I mean, I knew that my dad was not in the home, but I had a large network of other family members, not in the area, but just knowing that I had to answer to a lot of people. And so in the neighborhood, whether it was in the neighborhood or in schools or within the family, I knew that as a child, I was accountable to those adults. Now I think, again, in terms of what may contribute to some of the demise of that is children they're not really held accountable. So, it's kind of that children will be children adage. But being children in my household still meant that you had to follow certain rules. And it didn't take long to realize that there were consequences if you did not follow those rules.
And really, don't we do our kids a disservice if we don't discipline them or have these expectations? Because when they get out in the real world, there are rules that have to be followed. You don't get to just go, well, some people think they can just go and do whatever, but then they wind up in front of you.
They do.
In the courtroom.
Well, and I write about this in the book. One of, actually, I think it's the first chapter, I talk about seeing the expression on children's faces when they look up at me with that question mark as if they're looking to their parents, but they're answering me and saying, how come you never told me that? Because so often I feel that I'm the first person that has said, look, if you're going to go to step B, you've got to do this, this, and this. I am amazed how many children I ask what goals they have. Just tell me something you want to do. I don't care if it's you want to get a bike or you want to, often I hear I want to get a tattoo. Anyway, there are a whole list of things I hear. But when I ask that and they've never thought about it, it makes you wonder, well, why didn't that parent or grandparent or aunt or uncle,
some adult in their
life discuss with them the fact that, there's a future that you need to be concerned about.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Give us a call. We're talking about raising our kids, about setting expectations for our children. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Your book it's a how-to manual, which I love.
It is.
And you set up a scenario. The areas you cover: confidence, accountability, purpose, discipline, resilience, manners, independence, love, protection, endurance. You lay out a scenario for each of these areas or several scenarios, and then you talk about lessons within them, and then you review at the end of the chapter to give parents something to think about. A lot of people say, when you have a baby, well, there's no how-to manual. So I guess you created one, huh?
Well, I'd like to think so. I've had so many people say to me that this is a book that should be given out at hospitals when babies are born. Of course, I've dealt with a lot of educators, especially in the context of the book, and they say, every parent of every school-age child should read the book. And so you're right. I've laid out a lot of actually lessons. That's the way I look at it, is lessons that I learned from my mother, but also, as you said, a go-to, how-to, hope-filled manual or journal for how to raise children, which are or who are our most precious resource.
So, Judge Owens, when did we as parents become afraid of our children? I hear so many parents say, well, I'm afraid that they won't like me, or I'm afraid they'll say something if I try to discipline them. When did the kids start taking over?
I don't know when it happened. I know it has happened, and I agree with you. I get so sick of hearing parents say, well, I can't make them go to school, or I can't make them mine. I think, again, it's part of this bigger problem that we have, that there's so many parents that view their children as friends, or they want to be liked better than they want to be the disciplinarian. And I have said so many times that in my view, you cannot be a good or strong disciplinarian until you first establish that trust, that bond of trust and love, and then you can discipline from that. So it's not based on being a buddy, but it's based on the fact that children ought to know that, one, we as adults know more about life and about experiences than they do, but also that we're doing or trying to teach them lessons and showing them, again, I can show you better than I can tell you, but showing them out of that love and that trust.
And shouldn't we also be instilling in them a sense of respect of adults, and particularly with parents, because I listen to some kids and the things that I hear them say to their parents. If I said that to my parents,
it would end quickly.
It would end quickly.
It would end quickly.
That would be a good way to put it.
Barbara, you are so on point in terms of it's respect. It's respect for themselves too, though. I mean, if you look at the way children and their parents come to court dressed, or if you look at the way they even represent themselves in court in terms of the things that they say, that, as you said, I would rather, I don't want to say be dead, but almost anything than to let a parent hear some of the things that they say without any shame or trepidation at all. So you're right. There's somewhere we lost that.
And some of this also has to do with, I think, or I'm asking, with the whole idea of how much you decide within your own household that this is the way it's going to be, regardless of how society is doing it. For example, when you're talking about dress and how you come to court, I see people come to court very casually, or they come to church the same way. Now, some say, well, you should be able to come to church anyway. But I guess at one point in time, we were taught that was a means of respect also. And or when you go to a formal function, or even when you go to school, I mean, to me, that's just a part of, as you said, respecting yourself, but also just kind of setting that standard so that standard carries over into your adult life.
Well, I think there's a time and a place for, very casual dress. Sure. The problem is there's so many children that, as you said, if you see them at church, they look the same way they do in school. They look the same way they do in court. And I believe that, again, there's certain kinds of dress that are more appropriate for certain situations. I probably see a young man, and I always comment, dressed, meaning jacket, clean pressed shirt in court, probably once a quarter. So not even once a week or once a month, but I would say once a quarter.
And I can hear somebody sitting in the audience going, yeah, but I don't have the money to buy them dress clothes or whatever. But it's not even the type of clothes that you're wearing.
It could be
as to ironing them. Exactly.
Right.
Pulling your pants up.
That's right.
So that they're around your waist as opposed to around the bottom bottom of your buttocks. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
And so as you see these things, and then that also sends off to society, does it not? A message that you may not want to send. You may be brilliant up top, but if you continue to dress that way and to slouch and to not carry yourself in a certain way, then aren't you perceived in a negative light?
You are, and there again, the parent or the responsible adult is generally the one buying these things. So if you if you're firm about what you're going to allow and not going to allow, then you don't buy it. But again, there's that friendship factor that says, I need this, or this is what everybody else is doing. That's another thing. I never, or I learned early not to use that excuse that everybody else was doing it, because in our household, we weren't allowed to do what everybody else was doing. And now I can say for certain that some of the things that everybody else was doing, I'm so happy that my mom didn't allow me to do, because I definitely wouldn't be sitting here with you today. I know that.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Is there any aspect of raising your child that you're struggling with that you'd like Judge Olds to talk about? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So let's talk about some of the things that you say we should be doing. For example, in accountability. Talk about what parents should do to instill accountability in their children.
It's very simple. Again, expect more. If you say that something's not going to be tolerated and then the rule is broken, then there has to be a consequence for that. I believe most parents think that they do that, meaning they'll say, well, if they don't clean up their room, or if they don't go to school, then I'm going to take the phone, or I'm going to take the computer. And they do, but they do that for a day. And then when the whining starts, or as someone told me not long ago, well, they need to be able to get in touch with me. Well, we managed to be in touch before we had cell phones and computers and iPads and all that stuff. So I think it's oftentimes more difficult on the parent, and I acknowledge that. I mean, I have had situations where I had to make that call, and it is oftentimes very difficult as a parent to just say, no, I said if this happens, this is going to be the consequence, and then you have to stick with it.
Because a lot of times when you have to punish, take away something or not allow them to go someplace or whatever, then you have to stay home too.
That's right.
And you have to be there to oversee that. I was smiling when we were talking about taking away the phone and so forth. I remember once sending my daughter to her room and then realizing she had a computer, a phone, a
so she didn't
TV.
Need you.
So going to her room was not not the appropriate
That's
punishment. True. But once you set that boundary, then so the lesson for parents is once you say no, mean no, and then enforce
it consistently. The other point you raised is when people ask me, just in short, how do I keep my child out of trouble? I say you have to know where they are. And then the second part, of course, is know who they are with. And then, as you pointed out, oftentimes there's a sacrifice from the parent. As much as possible, be there with them. As much as possible.
And really, our kids want us to be there.
They do. And really, our children don't need or want another friend. Parents seem to think that it's easier to go along, get along. But in my experience, and that's why I mentioned earlier when I said people look at me and say, how come you haven't told me that? They really want somebody to give them that guidance and that structure.
And that's what they're looking for. Okay, let's see. We've got a phone call. Abdul joins us from Norfolk. Hi, you're on the air.
Hello, how you doing?
Okay, how are you?
I'm great. I was just telling a young lady that I work in a local detention center, and Judge Olds, I've never met you, but I admire you, and your name has echoed throughout the detention center. But the children really don't know how to dress. They really don't know how to present themselves in a humble manner, how to go before the judge. And so these are some of the things that we teach them at the detention center. I'm going to give you an example of one young man who was facing some serious charges and had to do with assaulting someone with a weapon. And he came in with this shirt on, and it had guns on the front of his shirt. And that's how he was going to go to court on Monday morning. I told him to take that shirt off and turn it around and do not go on. And when you get a chance, have your mother bring you a change of clothes, because you should not be going to to court with that shirt on. So I was telling her, if you could come we welcome you to come to the detention center to speak to the residents and on the appropriateness and how they should the etiquette and everything, how they should come to court, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Abdul. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you as well, and thank you for your good works, because oftentimes it takes a child getting detained before they, quote, get it. And so when they're in your hands, I think they're a lot more receptive to hearing things that would serve them well. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. There's we've got a question from our Facebook page which says, how do you create a balance between being too strict and being too lenient?
Well, I think it goes back again to what I said about being consistent. Trust begets trust. So when you set certain rules and then you see that they're followed, I think that may be the appropriate time to kind of pull back a little. But until you get that consistency and that compliance, then I don't think there is a balance. I think there has to be a hard line up until that point.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. We're talking about raising our children today. And if you're just joining us, we're talking with Judge Eileen Olds, author of Twin Expectations, Raising the Bar, Raising Expectations, Raising Children. Judge Olds, you talk about creating a sense of purpose in our children's lives. What do you mean by that?
Well, each child or each person, for that matter, I believe has a distinct, unique purpose that's assigned to them. And I see so many instances where parents pigeonhole their children into what they think they should be. And I think we have to be a little more flexible with understanding not only what's important to the child, but what it is that they were created to do. Not every African-American boy was created to play sports. Not every African-American girl was created to do hair or to sing and dance. And so we have to help them define what it is that they can do well and what they can excel at. I'm also the first to say not everybody is going to go to college. Not everybody is cut out to do manual labor. But when they are, I think as parents and as concerned adults, it's our job to help nurture that.
Okay, and also, excuse me, let me apologize to the audience because my allergies are going haywire here, and I'm trying really hard not to cough. But Leona joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, Leona, you're on the air.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Sure.
I just have a question. I have a special needs kid, young man. He's 23. I'm a single mom, and there were some difficulties growing up. But my question is, I feel like I have missed the mark with my son, and he's 23 now. I wonder, what are your thoughts on, is it ever too late to take corrective action?
Well, you just said exactly what I was going to say, and that is it's not too late. And even though we have these, I say, fictional milestones, 18, 21, we know that children and young adults need guidance for a lot longer than that. So if there are areas that you can be helpful, or there are things that you believe that young adult should take benefit of, then I think by all means you have to do that. What I'm saying in short is I don't believe in saying, and I hear that often too. You're 21, pack up your stuff, get out of the house, you're grown. People mature at different levels. I've seen 14-year-olds that can run a household, and then I've seen, 25-year-olds who can't or don't know how to go look for a job. So I think you have to look at the individual. So I'll answer your question again by saying, no, I don't think it's ever too late.
Leona, thanks so much for the call.
All right, lovely. Thank you.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you very much. We talked about discipline. We know what that's about. Manners. How and what should we be teaching our children about manners? And I know I'm looking.
Okay. How long do we have?
I was going to say, if the audience could see your face, I know that that's a big one. And your ultimate goal is to keep kids out of your courtroom, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. And I said when I began to write the book, and I continue to say it, the goal of the book is to create what I call a movement. And so I always say it's more than a book, it's a movement, because it's a movement towards having better generations in the future. And so part of that is clearly manners and etiquette and just common decency and civility. Treating others as we would have them to treat us, and being respectful and all those good things. So yes, I think we need a whole show on manners. Maybe it's coming, but no, manners is big, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think that it may be generational, though, that if the parent was not taught manners and they don't know how to pass it along? And so if that is your situation, then is it not your responsibility as a parent then to go find out what you need to know so that you will pass it on to the next generation? And
the things that you would assume maybe are taught in the household as a matter of right oftentimes are not. But there are programs, there are, there are rites of passage programs, there are actually a lot of etiquette classes that are popping up all over the country. And, don't be ashamed to take advantage of it. It's okay if you as a parent don't know all of the nuances of etiquette and civility, but there's help.
Chelsea joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Chelsea. You're in the air.
Hello. Yes. I just wanted to comment on Judge O's book. I've read it, and I agree that everything basically should come from home first. I grew up in a family of caring aunts, uncles, cousins, so it takes all of us to help with the children and to steer them in the right direction. I agree with her wholeheartedly, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. We appreciate that. A lot of times parents will say, you know what, I'm just overwhelmed. I'm too busy. And he's 14 and he should know better. Is there a point where they should know better? Or, parenting really does take all of your time and effort all the time, does it not?
Well, but children can't do better until they know better. And it's our responsibility to see to it that they know better. Back to your whole question about purpose, as I said, my mom didn't call it purpose. I don't ever remember anybody saying, well, Eileen, what's your purpose? But what she did require is that we follow rules, and that we know the difference between right and wrong, and that we have some aspirations. Again, she didn't say, I want one of my twins to be a doctor and I want one of my twins to be a judge. But the expectation, again, that word expectation, was that we would always do our very best.
So the expectation was you do your very best. Those lessons that she taught you were not. She didn't wake up and say, okay, today is lesson number 12.
No.
But it really was just a part of the everyday living.
Exactly. And, the lessons are gifts that keep on giving. Even to this day, there are days when, I feel a certain way or think about people a certain way, and then I remember a lesson that my mom taught. And that's the whole point. We ought to be making we ought to have impressionable lessons that we impart to children that last for a lifetime.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Ted joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, Ted. You're on the air.
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning to you.
Hi.
I worked in the juvenile court system in Virginia for 15 years. I want to observe that the hardest calling in the world is that of a conscientious juvenile court judge, because whether it's a custody or a criminal matter, the conscientious judge who's concerned about the ultimate outcome performs a wonderful and difficult service for the community. Thank you.
Amen, Ted. And Barbara, this might be a good time for me to share with the listeners that our court, again, we're talking a lot about juveniles, but the full name or the title of the court is the Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court. And so we deal with children, but we also deal with conflicts between other family members. So I have a front row seat to a lot of social ills, a lot of family conflict, a lot of crime, custody, support, visitation, abuse and neglect, domestic violence. I mean, the list is so long. So, again, Ted, you're right. There's a lot of subject matter that we handle, but I count it as an honor, and it's definitely a privilege.
There's someone writing in from Facebook who wanted to know if you think it is the disproportionate minority representation in the justice system. How do we turn it around, one, and does some of this non-parenting add to that, particularly within our community?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. There is clearly an overrepresentation of minorities in not just the juvenile justice system, but the criminal justice system at large. And it would take a discussion that deals with many aspects of the criminal justice system, meaning it's not just that people end up in court and the dockets are loaded with or heavily loaded with African Americans. It has to do with interface with police officers, with the community, with store owners and neighbors, and I mean just how African Americans are still perceived or presumed to do certain things at a higher rate than others.
Then that also makes it even more incumbent upon parents, then, particularly of African American boys, to instill in them the kinds of things you're talking about in this book, the sense of purpose, the discipline,
That's right.
So that they can navigate and one, not put themselves hopefully in a position where they have to interact with the justice system at all. But if they do, even, they still would know how to navigate or
Exactly. No, you're right. And it's not so much to instill a spirit of fear, but it's knowledge. Knowledge that if you encounter a police officer, again, be respectful. Don't talk back. Don't try to. I always joke about how many people watch TV and hear you have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you. And what do? They talk. So again, but there is an overrepresentation, and it's a much more loaded subject than I think we can.
It was interesting on another show that we've done recently. There was a surprise from non-African American parents that the discussion of how do you approach a police officer is usually held within the Black household, because there is a way that you need
and it
to.
Should be.
Okay.
It should be. Again, the statistics bear out that more police brutality occurs with African Americans, but again, I think it's a big educational piece that we're missing. So we need more sensitivity training with police officers. We need it, as I said, with security officers, because there are certain cultural markers that are still not understood by the larger community.
Danny joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, Danny. You're on the air. Hello, Danny. Are you there?
Hello?
Hi, are you there? You're on the air.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was actually have a question for you about step parenting. I'm not sure where we find the balance in how we are supposed to continue to discipline and, I guess, help the kids along. We get them about half the time, but our style of parenting is obviously different than the mother's style of parenting, and it's a little bit more strict, I guess you could say. So how do we find the balance between that?
Okay, good question, Danny. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. Danny, I think you're referring to perhaps a shared custody arrangement. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I generally tell parents that when you are the physical custodian, that your rules govern. And so children have to understand that when I'm with my father, what my father says goes, and when I'm with my mother or aunt or grandparent, whoever the non-custodial parent, then it's their rules that go. When you speak of balance, I think you're talking about the conflict that often arises between the two styles. And so if we're going to have the child appreciate that the one that calls the shots when the child is with them is the one that rules, then I think parents have to honor that too. There's no way to police what goes on in the other household. Of course, ideally, and balance would be to meet some common goal.
Okay.
Thank you, Danny, for the call. We appreciate that. Deborah joins us from Newport News. Hi, Deborah. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Hello, Your Honor. How are you today?
Fine, thanks.
I as a parent, I have a young adult son, and I'll say that he's he's a wonderful kid. I have not had any legal trouble with him other than a normal teenager. But, the buck stopped with me and his father, and one of the things that I see, I'm not not trying to pass the blame, but part of the problem I see is with social services. You discipline your child. Well, if he doesn't like what you're doing, he calls social services and says, my parent beat me. Well, now social services has gotten involved. Now you're in the court system. So I can see where the parents want to go along to get along, because now they're dragged into court for, because the child knows that he can call social services if he's not getting what he wants.
Actually, Deborah, you just read my mind because that was going to be my next question
Really?
to the judge.
Okay, well, Deborah, let's talk about, I'm assuming you're referring to physical discipline. Is that right? Physical punishment?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I will be the first to admit, my son got spanking. I never beat him.
Okay, let's not have me really comment on whether you should spank your child or not. But I think from our conversation, you can probably infer. But social service does have the obligation to look into situations like that. However, I would say by and large, they are very understanding of that distinction between discipline and abuse. And no one, including the court or social service or even you as a parent, would tolerate abuse of a child. But discipline in and of itself is not something that the court sanctions. So, it may be an uncomfortable, and I'm not sure if that's something you've experienced personally, but there's always that threat, but it's not as real of a threat, I think, as people use it as as an excuse. Like, I don't do it because I don't see many cases where, the child called social services on the parent. Okay,
I'm going to try to get one or two more calls in because we've got about 5 minutes left. Sherry joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Sherry.
Hi, yes, good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call. Enjoy the show.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
I just wanted to comment on a point you made about college education in particular, and I often say this. I remember when I was attending high school and some of the high-achieving students that I attended with, and, just listening to the side chatter, and I remember some of them saying, I worked so hard and, I only got an A-. My parents are going to be so upset. One of the things that I noticed is not every child is cut out, like you say, to go to college. And I think sometimes parents may push their child too hard to go in that direction when they don't realize that this child may be more mechanically inclined. You might have a child that's doing a lot of clowning. And, our natural inclination is to discipline them, straighten them out, put them on the right track. I've often, thought if there was a school, and there are some schools in some areas, like your arts high schools and everything, that educate towards the child's natural abilities, their strengths.
Okay.
And I know for myself, I'm a hands-on learner.
Okay, Sherry, let's let Judge Olds have a time to answer because we're just about out of time.
Well, and I think you're very much on point, and that was what I stated earlier, is that we have to allow them to fulfill their purpose, not our purpose. And I think a lot of times parents live through their children and are a little emphatic about what they're supposed to be. But you're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. So, Judge Olds, in overall, if you could leave a message with parents today, what would that message be?
Be the parent. Not try to create that friend. There is inherently in being a parent, being a friend, because again, a friend is a trusted individual, but to do all that is within your power, and again, that's the whole point of the book, is to help children not only to do better because they see better and because more is required of them, but also to help them expect more. I think expectations is such a big part. When nobody expects you to succeed or when nobody expects you to stay out of trouble, then it's much more difficult to do that. Mm-hmm. But children need to be raised knowing that there's somebody that's watching, there's somebody that cares, and there's somebody that's going to support them so that they do stay out of trouble, stay in school, and be productive
and
citizens.
Take away out of their vocabulary, you can't.
You can't. You can't. I mentioned, I hope we have time for this, but my second grade teacher, who, by the way, sponsored a book signing for me not long ago, because I mentioned, and I think it was our last caller that said how we have to be careful about some of the things you say to children, how or channeling them in the wrong direction. But I write about how in the second grade, my teacher said, oh, Eileen, you talk so much. One day you're going to make a great lawyer. And I praise her even now for that, because had she said, you're such a blabbermouth, or
right,
you're always talking, you need to shut up, then that would have had a much more negative effect. So that's my other message, is to encourage children and to see the good in them and not treat them as little adults. They are not little adults. They think differently. They act differently. Their needs are differently. Their wants are differently. And so that's what I would leave you with.
The book is called Twin Expectations, Raising the Bar, Raising Expectations, Raising Children. Very quickly, you have a book signing coming up. When is it?
I do. I have a book signing next Saturday, not tomorrow, but June 15th from 1 to 3:30 at the Barnes & Noble store in Chesapeake. So I'd love to meet, I call my book readers expectations advocates. I'd love to meet some of you there.
Okay, great. Judge Oates, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And we'll be right back.
I am Brother Cornell West, and when I'm in Hampton Roads, I make it a point to listen to Another View with my dear sister Barbara Ham Lee on WHRV-FM.
And thank you, Dr. West. And when he is in the area, he does listen to Another View. So whether you're a history buff or just interested in tracing your African roots, you'll find the Richmond slave trails fascinating. The walking trails will take you to more than a dozen stops, with each location revealing the story of enslaved Africans who were traded in Virginia. Our Lisa Godley recently took the tour and now shares part of that journey.
It's often quite interesting when you peel an onion just what you'll find. State Delegate Dolores McQuinn grew up in Richmond, Virginia, but it wasn't until she started doing research on the journey of slaves from Africa to their arrival in Richmond that things really began to unfold.
We had no clue that Richmond was actually the epicenter of the slave trade.
Now Delegate McQuinn and others interested in preserving this piece of American history have developed the Richmond Slave Trail, a self-guided walking tour that chronicles the path of enslaved Africans. It begins at their arrival point, Richmond's Manchester docks.
There are 17 stops, and we have markers on those 17 stops from south side of the river, south of James River, where Manchester Dock begins, to the first African church.
Delegate McQuinn says while all the stops along the walking trail help to bring the story to life, one of the most fascinating stops to her is the Lumpkins jail site and the story of the slave trader, Robert Lumpkin.
You had Robert Lumpkins, who was a slave trader. He married his slaves. They had 5 children. He was one of the most notorious slave traders that lived. If people wanted their slaves punished, they would send them to him. And it was just so many horror stories that happened there. Here you are, the slave trader, and you married your slave, okay? And now, so you're looking at a woman or married to a woman that look like the same folks that you have enslaved. And so I said, what hypocrisy. After Robert Lumpkins died, all the inheritance was left to Mary Lumpkins and her children. So she offered them the this Lumpkins jail site to educate the free slaves.
As a result, what was once referred to by the slaves as the Devil's Half Acre would take on a new identity as a learning institution and would be called God's Half Acre.
But the story doesn't stop there, because Virginia Union University evolved right from here, from this site.
And Virginia Union University would produce numerous leaders, including the nation's first African-American governor, the Honorable L. Douglas Wilder.
The belief in these dreams held by those forebears was passed from generation to generation and spawned the seeds that propagated the will and the desire to achieve.
Signage and markers lead the way past auction houses, a burial ground, and a reconciliation statue, helping to tell a story that many, like Margaret, Queen of Connecticut, are anxious to hear and share.
We need to pass it on to our children, to our grandchildren, our generation. Our culture is so lost. We are so intermixed, and we need to learn more about our own heritage.
Delegate McQuinn agrees, but says the project is far from complete.
We are actually working on a $12 million campaign now to raise funds, to put a pavilion here, to do some other things with this particular site as we move in the direction of developing the museum, the living museum, the walking museum for this area.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And for more information on where to find the walking trail, just go to our website, anotherviewradio.org. Time now for things to view and do in Hampton Roads.
You will be my Saturday love.
Come gather at the water at WHRO Beach in Hampton to honor the millions of African men, women, and children who perished during the Middle Passage. Hosted by the Sankofa Project, the remembrance will occur tomorrow, Saturday, June 8th, from 11 until 1 on the beach at North 1st and Pilot Avenue. It's free and open to the public. Call 816-1579 for details. The premiere of the film The Cherokee Word for Water is Sunday, June 9th at 1 at the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art, Parks Avenue in Virginia Beach. Tickets are available. Call 636-1475 for more information. Cleaver Communities in Action presents Fatherhood in the Black Community, a panel discussion on what it means to be a father. It's Saturday, June 15th from 4 until 7 at the House of Consciousness, 35th Street in Norfolk. Call 918-7879 to find out more. The Hampton History Museum invites you to get on board the Hampton History Bus Tour. Native Americans, British settlement, African arrival, Civil War, emancipation, and so much more. Hampton has played a role in all of these historical events. The tour takes 2 hours and is every Saturday through October. Call 727-1102 for reservations. And Fort Monroe hosts its annual Music by the Bay Summer Concert Series, held at the Gazebo at Continental Park every Thursday this summer. Kickoff is Thursday, June 13th with the U.S. Fleet Forces Band Wind Ensemble. It's free and it's open to everyone. More information is available at 251-2754. These and other events are on our website, anotherviewradio.org. You can also sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. And you can get the podcast of today's show or any other Another View program. Just go to WHRV.org, click on podcasts, and then click on Another View. Next week, the June edition of the Roundtable. Our panelists have been talking to each other through email since the last time we were together, so I'm sure we're in for a lively discussion. For producer Lisa Godley, audio engineer Perry Smith, Anastasia Champ, who answered our phones, I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a fabulous weekend, stay dry, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.